Hello and welcome to the joint MDB Pavilion. This event in the middle of the day is one of our joint events, and today we are going to be giving you a progress update on our Paris alignment work. And as you may know, in the middle of every day here at the COP, there's a joint MDB event, so please do watch out for the events in the coming days as well. I'm very happy that to kick off this update on Paris alignment, we have the Vice President of the European Investment Bank, Ambroise Fayol, and I'm going to invite him to make some opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Nancy. Thank you, and don't worry, I will not be long. This is a sort of family event, and actually, I've been in this position for many years, and I see that the family is getting along much better than it did. So I am very, very pleased about that. And one of the evidences is the fact that we have been able to publish the climate finance report, to publish the joint statement of MDBs, a lot of work that we do together, and with no real worries compared with what we have seen in the past. So it means that indeed we are answering the call from the G20 and others actually that we need to cooperate much more. We need to do much more things together. And if I want to take just two examples of it, the long-term strategy, the LTS, that has been discussed for quite some time. And now we have reached for this BB4 actually project, we have reached a consensus. And I hope that we will be able to launch the LTS within the CSF very soon. And that because actually the poor countries need that we move forward on this long-term strategy. And the second thing is, and the new president of the World Bank has been really playing a very important role there, is the increase in co-financing. And you can see not only the figures, but you can also see the spirit in which we are working together, which I think is very much promising. Talking one word about BB3, climate finance report, record year for the MDBs. Now it needs to be translated into more financing from private sector as well. But we are on really the track that we increase year after year the record level of climate for finance and finance for climate and environment, and this is really something that I welcome. The more than $60 billion for low and middle income countries in 2022 was something that is remarkable, and I'm sure that in 23 we will do even more. I will finish by saying just one thing related to the first of the building blocks and the second one. What we do is related to climate risk, and we need to make progress in assessing the climate risk in our portfolio. But we need not to lose the target. The target is to help our clients. And the target is to help our clients in their transition. And the target is to help our clients avoid the risks that are associated with climate change. And I hope that whenever progress we can do in simplification, in the tracking, all the methodologies that we get together, we don't forget that at the end of the day, what counts is that we convey the right message to our clients and that we help them. And I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much, Vice President Fayol. We are now going to have a little bit of a history lesson, and for those of you that have seen it before, I apologize, but it's very difficult for us to talk about what we've done on our Paris alignment framework this year if we don't explain to you what it is and how we got to it. So I'm going to invite three MDB colleagues to come up and take us through the history and what we've done in this last year since last COP. And that is Cinzia Luceno from EIB, Olatunji Yusuf from Islamic Development Bank, and Sung-Ah Kyun from EBRD. And we're going to start with Cinzia, please.
Thank you, Nancy, and good afternoon, everybody. So I'm Cinzia Luceno from the European Investment Bank, and I'm going to walk you through very quickly to a brief history on how we got here. If we can have the slides. I have the slides, I have the power. Okay, all right. So here we go. I'm going to start, of course, from 2015 for obvious reasons, the COP of the Paris Agreement, where MDBs committed to support the implementation of the Paris Agreement. And this is where it all started, really. We realized we had to work even more closely together and together with other partners to really understand how we could better support the adaptation mitigation goals, the financing objectives of the Paris Agreement. We started working together, and over the years, you will see we made progressive commitments and announcements to better develop, define, and then implement our approaches for supporting the goals of the Paris Agreement. And in order to do that, over the years, we had to really take a very good look at what we were doing. So the operations that we support, the type of projects, the type of finance we provide, the direct lending, the more complex type of lending, but also the advisory and the technical assistance we provide, the support to client. We also had to take a look at our own financing and how we use it, our treasuries, our pensions, the way we procure goods and services, but also the way we manage building. We really took a very good look at what we do to understand how we could support really the goals of the Paris Agreement in all our activities. And so over the years, we developed that approach through a common framework, through principles, and in Katowice, we announced our framework made up of 6 main building blocks. And since then, we come to the COP, and we've been providing progress and share with you what we are doing in order to implement these common framework and principles. And we come to really last year, 2022, where we shared with you the principles for Paris alignment in our operations, which is the latest update in our common thinking on how to support the goals of the Paris Agreement. So that's a very quick run through the history of our collaboration to develop our common approach. And I'm going to here we go. I'm going to describe very briefly the 6 building blocks that make this common framework for Paris alignment. Of course, building block 1 is about the temperature goal, the mitigation goal of the Paris Agreement, and it's about our new operations, so the forward-looking approach, but it's also about our existing operation, what we're already doing in order to align to the temperature goal of the Paris Agreement. The second, The second building block is about adaptation and the adaptation goal of the Paris Agreement. And again, similarly to building block 1, it has 2 parts, the forward-looking, the new operations, and what we are doing to support the adaptation goals in new operations, as well as the backward-looking approach, taking into account the risk in our portfolio So for building block 1 would be transitional risk, and for building block 2 is about the fiscal risk, okay? So when we were developing the approach, we thought we could combine, in fact, these two building blocks, because it's all about one pathway. It's about a low carbon, climate resilient pathway. But then we decided to keep them separate, and the reason for that was really to give adaptation enough relevance and prominence in our approach, as often, as we all know, it gets buried into what we do to support mitigation goals. All very important, extremely important, but we decided to keep them separate exactly for not losing track and attention the importance of adaptation as well. Now, building block 3, it's about finance. We still need to focus on the need to mobilize and provide finance for climate action. That's a key, of course, objective of what we do in the MDBs, and therefore that building block is all about that. Building block 4 is about working with the client, which was the point that our Vice President mentioned, and it's really about supporting the strategy, the vision of our clients, so countries and other types of clients, cities, corporates, etc., to move towards a climate resilient, low carbon pathway of development. This is where the long-term strategies comes in, the support for national adaptation plans comes in, the net zero strategy, etc. This type of building block. So it's very much about the country and the client. Building block 5 is about transparency. It's our reporting effort, and it is about providing clarity about what we do, the way we provide the finance, and ultimately the impact that we have on the ground. And finally, building block 6 is about really walking the talk. It's about what we do internally. It's the way we manage our buildings, we reduce energy consumption, we procure in a way that is sustainable. It's about our treasury, our pension funds, etc., etc. It's all about our own internal finance. So that's, I hope, a very brief overview of the framework of the 6 building blocks. And now I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Olatunji, who is going to talk you through progress. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cynthia, for that. History, they say, can be a very good precursor to the future. So with that very good historical background that Cynthia actually gave, we can then talk about some of the progress that we've actually made. Just to say that it's very possible that you see some of the text not showing fully well. There are probably conversion issues between the PPT and what is projected on the screen. So apologies for that, just to make that clarification. It's quite important to talk about some of the things that we have worked on since the last time that we had this conversation with most of the colleagues that are here in Sharm el-Sheikh. Is to talk about some of the progress that we've made collectively as MDBs on the commitment that we've made on Paris alignment. One is around, which is going to be building on the various building blocks, which Cynthia talked about earlier, is around operationalization. This year, as MDBs, we collectively actually released our high-level Paris alignment assessment methodological principles, which actually covers the various activities and different instruments that we have as MDBs. And currently, each and every one of us, we're putting in some of the systems that would help us to actually implement and mainstream that in our own internal processes. But also is to say that all MDBs have committed to some sort of timeline as far as Paris alignment is concerned, which I'm going to show in the next slide. But also, different MDBs have also put in timeline to set in those internal systems and processes towards meeting that commitment that they have made as far as Paris alignment is actually concerned. But also is to say that, as we have heard in the last couple of days here at COP, and also the various happenings around the world, that we are currently, globally, facing what we call polycrisis, right? Including environmental, social, and economic. We're seeing rising debt, we're seeing conflict, we're seeing environmental degradation, and the impact of climate change being felt across the world. So despite all these challenges, the MDBs actually remain committed to continue to support our client in mainstreaming element of Paris alignment in the policies that we support and in investment that we actually have in our member countries. So this is something that MDBs will remain committed to, irrespective of some of the challenges that we have had to contend with our client. But also is the fact that we know that the global stocktake actually revealed that we are far from where we need to be on track for 1.5. And MDBs collectively, we continue to actually support our client to see ways in which we ensure that their policies actually align with the objectives of the Paris Agreement. But on finance as well is the fact that as MDBs, this year, which my colleague Sungha will talk about in details later, is one of the years where we have been able to actually surpass even some of the target that we have set collectively as MDBs. In all the economies where we operate, we got to about $100 billion in terms of climate finance that we collectively actually committed, and about $61 billion in low and middle income countries. But we do know that this is just a drop in the ocean when you compare it to what the world actually needs to get to the future that we want. And we continue to actually work as MDBs in that space, particularly to crowd in more private sector capital to support our client. But also is the fact that one of the things that we noticed in the last 12 months is the fact that there's a lot of increase from our client around capacity development on long-term strategy, which my colleague would also talk about on LTS, which is part of the way MDBs are actually responding to the requests that we're getting from our client in terms of building in-country capacity, both for public as well as private sector actors. Now, in terms of outlook, as MDBs, what are those things that we anticipate that in the years ahead we'll be looking forward to doing? One, as MDBs, we remain committed to aligning our financial flows with the objectives of the Paris Agreement, which is basically one of the discussions that we're having here around the work of MDBs on Paris alignment. And in this spirit, we also committed to actually mobilizing more climate finance for our client, and also supporting to help crowd in more capital, particularly from the private sector, which is one of the places where we feel that the resources to actually get to that transition to that low carbon and climate resilient future that we all want would come from. And we continue to actually play that role collectively with the various partners and stakeholders that we work with. Another area that we look forward to actually working with as many of you that are here and collectively as MDBs is around in-country coordination, which is an area that we feel that can have a multiplier effect in the delivery of the support that we actually give to our client, with the example of country-led platforms that some of you might probably be aware of. So these are some of the areas that we're beginning to look into as MDBs. But also is the fact that as MDBs, we want to go from the traditional finance that you typically know us of, okay, we provide $100 billion, and then what? That's the question that normally we get. And then that's the reason why as MDBs, we're beginning to move from that to look into, so we have agreed to work together in the area of results and metrics to look at outcomes. So what does $100 billion in climate finance, what does it translate to in this whole architecture of climate action globally? So this is an area that MDBs have collectively actually committed to working together in the years ahead. But also is to talk about the fact that MDBs have also committed to working on supporting long-term strategy, which Sunga will be talking about in details earlier. A few days ago here in this same pavilion, we launched our MDB LTS facility, which is an incredible platform that we do feel that would help us to be able to actually respond better to those different calls that we get from our client and from various stakeholders and groups. But also is that MDBs are also committed to taking the dimension of nature and biodiversity into the climate discussion beyond the way we have done in the past. And as in that light, MDBs have released the common principles for nature positive financing, which the group that we support within this all MDB community of practice are also helping to contribute to that. But also is the role that we play, that we're not just playing a role as MDBs, but also how do we support the financial system within which we operate. We are multilateral development banks. We play a very key role in the whole financial architecture of the world. But then how do we influence the other stakeholders within that space? And we continue to play that role, including things around looking at the role that carbon markets and market mechanisms they play in this whole architecture. An important element that a lot of our stakeholders have talked about is around Paris alignment reporting and reporting generally. And this is very much linked to the place of results and metrics that I mentioned earlier, which is around, once we look into that, then we'll be talking about how do we report, whether internally or externally. But these are things that, as MDBs, individually, we're working and collectively to look at those processes. What could a reporting mechanism, when it comes to Paris, what could they look like and things like that. And the last part is around supporting adaptation and disaster risk management. This year, MDBs collectively, we committed to actually supporting the early warning for all initiative and to ensure that everyone do have access to early warning system by 2027. So this is something that is quite ambitious as part of what MDBs have collectively committed to. This is what I mentioned earlier around the commitment that every MDB have made some sort of target as far as Paris alignment is concerned. So that's to show that even though we may not be there yet, but these are pointers to the ambition that MDBs have collectively made in our respective institutions to actually commit to the broader agenda on climate within the scope and remit of the Paris Agreement. Now, let's talk about the BB1 and BB2, which Cynthia briefly talked about earlier. In the previous years, we've talked about the framework, we've talked about those methodologies that we've put together as MDBs. But this year, one of the things that happened that is actually a very big win for all of us is coming up with those high-level methodological principles that guide how MDBs would actually address all of our investment, whether we're talking about investment that are actually targeted use of proceeds, like the way we have in our direct financing, and those that are without targeted use of proceeds, where you have intermediate financing, let's say counterparty-based sort of financing. So the benefit of this is that it will help shape the way in which our financing is actually being used in our respective investment. And you find out that quite a lot of MDBs have committed to different sort of target based on the previous slide that I've shown. And this methodology will play a very key role in helping to ensure that there is harmonization in the way we work. So it's not just the ISDB doing their thing or the World Bank doing their thing or EIB or EBRD or any of the MDBs, but then we have a common way in which we look at these different elements of the BB1 and BB2. And one of the things that we continue to do in our various working groups within the MDB group is to look at how we operationalize this, share experiences, share lessons that will be useful for us as MDBs, but also useful for the stakeholders that we engage with at the level of the country. And these are some of the key areas that we continue to hope that we'll continue to work with everyone here in the years ahead as far as Paris alignment is concerned. So not to take time, I'm going to stop here to give the floor to my colleague Sunga to talk about the work that MDBs have actually done in the past 12 months on BB3 to BB6. Sunga.
Thank you very much, Olatunji, and taking on the baton from you. So on BB3, it's already been mentioned, but the MDBs have recently published our joint flagship climate finance report for the figures of 2022. And we have delivered worldwide nearly 100 billion US dollars, and among which 61 billion in the lower and middle income countries. And this is the second year that we have surpassed our climate finance expectation that we announced in 2019 at the UNSG Climate Summit through our joint MDB high-level statement. It is also the first year that we have jointly, we have 10 MDBs in the report. CEB and NDB have joined in the reporting, and we'll continue to work together as 10 MDBs. So this is the update on BB3, and moving on to BB4. So BB4 and enhancing our climate policy support to countries and clients. So the demand for the climate policy support has been increasing. Just to summarize the evolving landscapes, there has been 148 countries working towards a net zero target to 2050. There have been 37 countries submitting the NDC update just in the past year. There are 68 LTS submissions so far, not enough, but in the past year there has been 11 new countries that have submitted the LTS. In terms of MDBs, we've reported in the past COPs as well, we've been taking stock of our BB4 collective activities. And just this past year, we have tracked 206 new activities, which is a 26 increase cumulatively from the past year. And then within the same duration, we have completed 144 activities. And those policy activities are transitioning into connecting with implementation and investments at the country level. I won't, considering the time, just to point out that there's a summary, a snapshot of our BB4 stock take, and for those interested, we can of course share the slides. Maybe just for this audience, a brief recap as to why BB4 is such an integral part of our MDB Paris alignment approach. It, as explained in the BB1 and BB2 assessment, LTS, NDC, the country level climate policies are integral part of assessing the Paris alignment of our new operations. So in those assessments, we're able to also identify where the information gap is. Where do we need to further provide support to be able to narrow that gap and inform ourselves as to where we provide the climate policy support. And as you can see, that tends to go in circle as to better helping country align their strategy and policies to inform better on investments, and therefore unlocking the market barriers and the investments that are needed to meet their climate goals. Moving on to, in the context of BB3 and BB4, I think it's quite important to also mention that MDBs have been working together on Article 6, mainly on the three main dimensions. One is capacity building. So capacity building through, you may have heard, the Climate Market Club, the Partnership for Market Implementation, and also there are various partnerships that MDBs are involved in the discussions around Article 6, implementation, and voluntary carbon markets. We're also working together to enable the infrastructure. So in order to there to be actual Article 6 transactions, you need the MRV system in place, such as through the Digital for Climate initiative, there is efforts to support a digital MRV, etc. And then also working together on the methodological developments that are underpinning these type of work. And last but not least, it's about also market creation for Article 6. So it's about identifying opportunities for Article 6 transactions, bringing together the buyers and sellers for potential transactions again. So, and all of this also exploring the non-market approaches. On reporting, so we have presented the transparency framework that we have jointly developed in the past COPs, and also the key reporting elements that I will show also in the next slide. It's maybe perhaps just to point out two kind of very important areas of emerging international standards that are also coming into discussions and really informing our reporting practices. One is the ISSB, the International Sustainability Standard Board work, and the ESRS, the European Sustainability Reporting Standard work that is informing kind of MDB's overall disclosure practices. And on the reporting key elements, as already previously mentioned, each MDB is working to operationalize essentially the reporting on climate, taking into account these different elements and mainstreaming it across the different reporting systems that are already in place. And last but not least, building block 6 about aligning our internal activities. As you can see, this is something that we actually presented also in previous COPs. We have worked together to develop a technical note that outlines kind of high-level guiding principles as to how we should internally align our activities. That's been informing our own, again, mainstreaming of our internal Paris alignment. And I would say that what's important is that we are committed ourselves to walking the talk, and that we are aligning along the key kind of components that have been presented, and that at an operational level, actually, a lot of this effort has gone beyond the climate team. So we will see in each of the institutions is many other teams involved in taking over the responsibility of operationalizing on BB6. So I think I will leave on the most important note, and I think it's already been captured in the introduction. But for the climate group, I think in the short term there will be kind of 5 main areas that we really want to focus on collaborating together. Number one is, of course, the knowledge exchange on the Paris alignment implementation. So that means really sharing our experiences of Paris alignment implementation across all 16 blocks, and specifically sharing our case studies on sector-specific activities and on how we're applying the methodological principles on the new operations for Paris alignment, as mentioned before, that we published this past June. And also to work further on the methodological development of the counterparty alignment in the finance operations. Secondly, as mentioned, it is about engaging on the results and impact metric. We are already working together on these elements, both on mitigation and adaptation outcomes, and I think in terms of the future reporting on our Paris alignment efforts, it will be important to communicate beyond just the climate finance, but really what has been the impact of the overall overarching activities of Paris alignment building blocks. And third is about scaling up strategic initiatives. Again, it's been mentioned, we've launched on the 5th, during our joint LTS event, we announced a MDB LTS program, which is about scaling our support. So we are already all individually supporting our client and countries on their LTS and DCN related activities, but we need more resources to be able to respond to the increasing demand. So that program is about increasing our capacity, but also better coordination and help it really at a country level, and also integrating nature and biodiversity into our climate activities. Fourth, briefly mentioned again before, but it's about also working together on country-led platforms. It is really about bringing, its goal is beyond policy coordination, but really then how do you bring in the policy and the investment and private sector mobilization, the climate finance all together at a country level, and where we can really increase our collaboration in the actions at a country and sector thematic levels. And last but not least, it's about reporting framework. Again, continuing to work together on sharing lessons and experiences on climate disclosure and Paris alignment reporting, and of course, continuing our efforts on climate finance and Paris alignment, mobilization reporting. I'll leave it there. Back to you, Nancy. Thank you.
Thank you very much to those colleagues. It's quite a challenge to get through everything the MDB climate teams have been doing in 25 minutes, so thank you very much. So we're going to go to a panel now. I'm going to be the moderator. My name is Nancy Sach. I'm the European Investment Bank's Chief Climate Change Expert, but we have a fantastic panel here from other MDBs, and we're going to have a few questions for them that I'm going to ask, and then we're going to open the floor to the audience to ask questions of me and of the panel, and then we will see where we get to, and we'll hopefully have an interesting wrap-up at the end. So on the panel, we have Dosama Al-Hamdou from African Development Bank, Ching Zhang from Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. I'm sorry that I got that wrong. We have Aurélien Boyer from IFC. We have Nora Lambrecht from IDB Invest. We have Daouda Ndaye from Islamic Development Bank and Gianpiero Nacci from EBRD. So a great range of experience here. And I'm going to start by asking a more general question to each of you, and then maybe a bit more specific question. In order that we have time for the audience, I'm going to ask you all if you can stick to 3 minutes for your first answer and 2 minutes for your second answer. We'll see how we get on, but we do want to have time for other questions. So, going first to Dosama Al-Hamdou at African Development Bank, I'm going to ask you, how is African Development Bank operationalizing its Paris alignment commitments in line with the MDB Paris alignment framework and consistent with your own bank's strategic framework on climate change for 2021 to 2030?
Okay, thank you very much, Nancy. Let me start by saying that our journey with adopting the Paris Agreement goals is not new, actually. Since the adoption of the agreement in 2015, we have tried to incorporate the key goals of the Paris Agreement into our new climate change action plan, because at that same time we have been developing our second action plan on climate change. And we have reflected the goals of the Paris Agreement there. For instance, promoting mitigation and low carbon development, which is actually BB1, and enhancing adaptation action in Africa, which is BB2, and also mobilizing climate finance, BB3, and creating enabling environment for climate action, which is actually a combination of BB4 and the others. So since the adoption of our own MDB common principles and methodologies on Paris alignment, what we did, actually, we participated in all the working groups on, among the MDBs. I chaired the working group on BB6. And we also tested together the projects, Paris alignment on a wide range of projects and in various sectors. In the bank, we have established an internal task force on Paris alignment, which has helped a lot in framing our narrative on climate, on Paris alignment. Now, how do we operationalize it? What I think 2 years ago, we adopted a new strategic framework on climate change and green growth for the next 10 years, 2021, 2030. And this framework has 3 components: a strategy, a policy, and an action plan. Actually, in the policy, we made it mandatory that all new operations are going to be designed based on climate-informed consideration, and that all operations have to be Paris aligned. It is a mandatory. It is adopted by our board. Also, we have adopted, the timelines that have been mentioned here. We have actually adopted a phased approach towards Paris alignment at the bank. We started with the 3 first building blocks, BB1, BB2, and BB3. And we said that, and we made it clear in our new strategy that new operations at the African Development Bank will be Paris aligned, based on BB1, BB2, and BB3 by December 2023, this year. The second phase now is the Paris alignment with the remaining building blocks, BB4, BB5, and BB6, which is by December 2025. So we adopted that phased approach. And currently, as I speak, we are developing a detailed, what we call Paris alignment roadmap, with specific actions on how we are going to deliver on those commitments we made. And actually, let me mention that we are operationalizing it at 2 levels. First, at the strategic level, we have engaged as early as possible with our board of directors on Paris alignment, on what are the implications of Paris alignment on banks' operations. And we made them aware of that. They understood. That's why they provided guidance on how we are going to implement it. And currently, every time we bring a new project at the board, one of the key questions they ask is it Paris aligned? So we are under pressure of responding to the demands from our board on that. And at operational level, this is where a lot of work is being done and needs to be done. We are currently, developing. We have developed, actually, we have updated our, what we call a readiness review process at the bank. The readiness review process is to review projects for quality at entry. Before they enter the pipeline for the year or the lending program, we need to ensure that some criteria are met. And we made Paris alignment as one of those criteria. We also revised the template for project appraisal reports to have a dedicated language, a narrative on Paris alignment in the project appraisal report of the bank. And this is supported by a detailed template on what we call a step-by-step Paris alignment assessment, which is included as a part of the technical annexes of the project appraisal report. We have also updated our climate change toolkit. You know, initially we have a toolkit of climate change based on, one is on climate risk assessment and one on assessing greenhouse gas emissions. And we updated the tool to include one module on Paris alignment. So the toolkit is now complete with another module on Paris alignment. Let me wrap up here by saying that you know, we are having a comprehensive capacity building program to assist our operational teams on Paris alignment. Starting with ourselves, the climate team. In September, we organized a dedicated training of trainers for the climate team, for us to be on the same page, and we speak the same language when it comes to Paris alignment. And this, now we are preparing the training for all the bank staff, including project managers, country managers, investment officers, country economists, country program officers on Paris alignment. We have started already with a small group, but we are going to do a bank-wide you know, capacity building program next year on that. And finally, we are currently testing what we call the monitoring, evaluation, reporting, and learning process on Paris alignment. So this is going to contribute to BB6, and this is going to help us monitor our progress on how we perform on Paris alignment. Thank you.
I have a feeling that you may have slightly overused your first 3 minutes. So I'm going to ask you the second question, and you have to answer it in one sentence.
Wow.
So you've talked about your phased approach for all 6 building blocks. Where do you think the key challenges that you need to overcome as you operationalize that whole program of 6 building blocks in African Development Bank? One key challenge.
Look, in my view, operationalizing the frameworks, all the 6 building blocks comes with challenges. But let me mention that you know, there are less challenges with the 3 first building blocks, BB1, BB2, and BB3, because we have been already doing that anyway in the context of our joint MDB framework on climate finance tracking, and also in the context of you know, our toolkit. We have been doing that. But more challenges are with the remaining building blocks, BB4, especially because it is about engaging clients, engaging countries, making sure that they are also Paris aligned. So this is one of the most challenging area. And we have put some system in place to help us on that. We have what we call the Africa NDC Hub, which is supporting countries to update, revise their NDCs. Even with the new financing instrument that we adopted, we included some technical assistance to provide support to countries when it comes to developing their NDCs and also LTSs. Also, I think another area we see some challenges is on BB5.
I'm going to have to ask you, because we've got the other 5. If we have time at the end, I'll come back. I'm really sorry, but we need to just make sure everybody gets their slot. And I think it's actually really difficult for all the speakers. Every single MDB is doing an enormous amount, as are many other IFIs and private organizations. And it's incredibly difficult to summarize a year's work plus your next 5-year plan in a few minutes. And I do apologize for that. I'm going to now move to Jing for AIIB. You started Paris alignment operationalization for new operations from the 1st of July. And what are the key lessons and reflections that you've gained already in those first few months?
Okay, thanks, Nancy. Since you just beside me, if I'm over time, you just cut me, right? Yes, right. AIIB, we started our Paris alignment operation from the 1st of July. So it's a kind of 4 or 5 months of the experience. But anyway, I will try to wrap into 3 points to share with you quickly. And the first one is really, it is so important to position Paris alignment in the context of AIIB at the highest possible strategy level, not as just a safeguard or the do no harm, but instead as an opportunity for identifying new, let's say, business generation and for the impact. I just put a little context in that. Colleagues, you may have heard about the CAF review, right, of the MDBs. One of the constraints for many MDB colleagues is the capital, but for AIIB, we are relatively new. We are still the newest. And then we still have actually quite abundant of capital sitting in our bank account. So for us, actually, the most challenging is to be able to find the good project and then to put this money to work as soon as possible. And then when it comes to the Paris alignment, we really consider this is one of the very important tools allowing us in doing so. So from those positive list of a project and also those projects where we believe we can improve, so therefore to improve their alignment with the Paris goals, right? And also all these kind of climate resilience and in the BB2 the colleagues had shared. So that's basically opened a lot of opportunities for us, for our deal team to think about. You know what, we just before coming here, we also have, we were approached actually by our portfolio management colleagues. They feel that it could also be a very good instrument to open the conversation with our existing client. We know that actually repeating client is going to be very important for our, let's say, overall business. So they think that is a very good point to discuss with client. So the first one. The second one I'm going to brief is really the point about the MDB to not work in a silo, but instead to work more with the overall the financing system. Because when we talk to the client on the Paris alignment, it's still new, right? I mean, a lot of questions about what it's about, like what the definition, what should we do, and so on and so forth. And even more, they are getting more confused as the market is getting also more different standards, different reporting requirements, and so on and so forth. I think that also give the MDB as a group a good opportunity to work together to bring the market and the client together and then to move ahead. And the last point, really, these concrete challenges we have faced is about a credible pathway, because this basically is the anchor for us to really to conclude the Paris alignment with that confidence. And then in that sense, we know that the lack of LTS and so on. So that is really this LTS facility the MDBs have launched is going to play a very important role in our view. And in addition, there is another example why PA could be a business generation opportunity, because for AIB, we now start talking about whether we should do a policy-based instrument. It's still a discussion with the board, but this is basically the area we identified with a lot of gaps during the implementation of PA. Thanks.
Thank you very much. You talked about the new financing operations and also how that has really led to a sort of bank-wide approach and at the highest level, as you said. What about your approach towards the other building blocks that do you see are the next steps for AIIB there on any of the other building blocks?
Yeah, so perhaps I will talk more about the BB6, the internal operations, right? So because BB6 involves really a different departments and which requires a very good actually coordinations of the entire bank. So what we are doing at the moment is from, let's say, the one kind of a key point about the building or the staff travels, and then we are on the good track. So actually, as we are talking about now, and then we are going to issue our second report and the carbon footprint report with a third-party verification and so on and so forth. I mean, going forward, for this particular component, the idea is to use as much as possible green electricity instead of like offsetting. But we have to be kind of realistic because we, in China, we need to have agreement with the power grid operators in order to will the green electricity to the building that we are working in, right? And the second is the treasury part. Our treasury colleagues I think is very enthusiasm about moving forward. They have already actually developed their ESG framework, not only about the carbon, but also the general environmental, social, and risk part. I think my point is, as we are dealing with the BB6, we realize there real kind of a new increased level of requirement on the better governance and a clearer role of responsibilities. And as such, we want to take this, I think, ISSB, which is coming to us as well, as a good opportunity, maybe kind of a ramper, right, to connect all the different pieces to eventually to make it happen. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to turn to Nora, Nora Lambrecht from IDB Invest. Could you talk about some key issues for the private sector? Because obviously that's the mandate of your institution for your private sector finance. For instance, when analyzing Paris alignment of transactions with financial institutions or with corporates. And do you find there is a specific role for BB4 in that?
Yeah, so the issue that we keep coming back to is that with Paris alignment, we need to be simple without being simplistic. And that sounds simple, but it's not. Because, I mean, you are all here, you're all a bit familiar with what the MDBs have been doing, and if you've read any of the frameworks, you get around to them after some time, but they are not the lightest of reads, because the concept is just, it is inherently complex. That's why we are at COP28, right? And we see that very much in the private sector. So for instance, when we do investments with corporates, depending on the financial instrument that we are deploying, we need to use a different methodology. So where we have clear use of proceeds, we can follow the money and we can analyze where the money is going. But in some cases, we might be providing working capital, or we might actually want to deploy equity, for instance. And in those cases, we need to analyze the business model of the counterparty. And then instead of following the money and saying, okay, is this aligned, yes or no, we need to take a more forward-looking approach, and then it becomes very much about enabling the transition for clients and also enabling resilience. Instead of looking, for instance, at the geolocation-specific physical risks that the client is exposed to and how they are managing them, it's instead much more at looking at what is the capacity of the client to identify those risks and to manage them, and first and foremost, to help them do so. And I think this is where we come to BB4, and we see that very much with our financial institutions clients, that at the end of the day, it's a very tough ask in the private sector to tell clients, you just need to be Paris aligned. This is our thing, to be Paris aligned. Many of our clients, this is not necessarily a terminology for them. So when you have the boundary conditions, the enabling environment, then it's so much easier. And we see with financial intermediates, for instance, that where regulation is ramping up, it becomes so much more of an easy conversation.
Thank you very much. Your second question is about the linkages between MDBs, sustainability policy frameworks, or whatever they call them, and Paris alignment. Using our framework, are some of the BBs more important than others in such policies, or do you think they all fit in somewhere? What's your view?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think as MDBs, we're lucky in that we all have very developed sustainability policy frameworks, and that I also think with Paris alignment has really helped us, because it meant, and if anybody has ever done a change management process, it's great if you can start somewhere and it's not all from scratch, right? So I think we see that on the one hand when analyzing operations, so BB1 for mitigation and BB2 for adaptation. In some cases, we can link it to our existing sustainability policy or environmental social safeguards frameworks. There are links here and there, depends a little bit. But on the other hand, also more widely speaking, MDBs are already doing a lot of reporting. That's also something. I mean, we're bureaucratic institutions. It's our bread and butter. And on the other hand, some of us are publishing sustainability reports and so forth, and have already been working on a lot of ESG integration, decarbonization of our own operations, even prior to Paris alignment.
Thank you very much. I'm going to turn to IFC now, to Aurélien Boyer. Can you tell us your lessons at IFC learned from implementing the Paris alignment principles for new operations, which is the forward-looking part of BB1 and BB2, within your institution, how that's progressing?
Yeah, thank you, Nancy. I think it's an important question because we've already reached a point where we need to take stock of the lesson learned to be more efficient in terms like going forward, and in terms of bringing efficiency and maximizing impact. But I'll start with something that might sound trivial, but that to me is important, is semantics. I think I've heard we keep talking about BB1, BB2, BB3. Let's be clear, this is MDB jargon. And the first lesson learned is we need to connect more with the market. We need to connect more with our private sector clients, and we need to use the market terminology. So one of the first decisions I took when I took over the climate finance policy team at IFC last July was to say, let's stop using BB1, BB2 internally. You don't see these words in our board papers anymore. We talk about helping clients to address transition risk, helping clients to address physical climate risk, and I think that's important. Otherwise, we are in our MDB bubble, and it's not how we're creating value for the client. So to me, that's one of the first lessons learned. Let's connect to the client. The second one is around institutional ownership. I think it's clear that for us at IC, Paris alignment is not does not belong to one particular team. It doesn't belong to the climate team, doesn't belong to ENS. It's something that we're working on mainstreaming so that it's embedded in our operation, it's embedded in our processes from concept stage till approval, and it's everybody's business. And this requires a lot of capacity building. It's also time consuming, but it's a worthwhile investment. The third one is around complexity of implementation, and here, like, I think it needs to be clear that we're all learning. We've been working on Paris alignment for a few years now, but it's still like we're all learning, and I think stakeholders with MDB need to understand it's a dynamic process, it's an iterative process. We're not going to be perfect, and you have to accept it. And I want to make it clear because we feel the pressure to be perfect from the beginning when we're still learning about the methodology. A bit related to that is I think I think we need to learn also and introduce some materiality component to Paris alignment. One thing that also struck me, we almost spending as much time, as much resource, making assessment of projects that are small in nature, that are not risky, as we are doing for risky projects and projects that are several $100 million. I think we need to all be honest and see in our approach to Paris alignment, how can we find a threshold of materiality in terms of what is acceptable to all be efficient. We have the same big goal of having operations on Paris aligned, but what does it mean in practice? And I'll go with a last point is on the climate. It's something that Nora and others mentioned. When it comes to the private sector, this can be super demanding. Depending on the client you talk to, the kind of requirement we have is very demanding, and we have to take this into consideration. We have to think how we can accompany client. Either it sometimes will be at the policy level, so we can make the implementation of a requirement easier, or sometimes it's through support to clients. I think it's key to think and we need to have the resources to provide advisory, because especially when it comes to the counterparty-based approach, it's easy to say, and we say in French, Yaka, please do 1, 2, 3, and you'll be Paris aligned. But then they're on their own. How do you help them? So that's, I think, the next step, how to better support clients.
Thank you. And again, from the private sector focus, as well as what you've said about new operations and how you engage with clients, do you see how the rest of Paris alignment, the other parts that we've talked about, might fit in your next steps? And are there any big challenges that you see there?
Yeah, I think here, the point I'd like to make is we should not think about these building blocks in silo. Actually, the way I see it is a lot of linkages, interconnection between the different building blocks. And let me, 3 examples. When it comes to BB3, since we're among MDBs, we're going to use the BB, but climate finance, the way for us it works is by implementing the first 2 building blocks, we're identifying new opportunities to increase climate finance. And we very much want to focus even more on adaptation finance. Paris alignment working on BB2 is a great opportunity to identify and raise climate finance and for adaptation under BB3. I think the same can apply when it comes to strategy and policy. Through our work, we can identify when we engage, what could make it easier under the NDC and the LTS of countries to link it to private sector needs, and working as one World Bank group, like this is a way to inform our CCDR and the need and how to implement at the policy level what we identify through transaction. And I see David here the same way when it comes to metrics. How can we link the outcome-based metrics we are developing to the assessment, so we're not redundant. The same when it comes to yes, and talking about reporting. I think like how can this inform what we learn through the transaction can inform the dialogue with ISSB and others in terms of addressing the needs of companies in emerging markets, and in turn, how can we, when we'll get these standards, can it facilitate our assessment of Paris alignment? So a lot of interlinkages, and that's where I would push going forward.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to try very hard not to say BB. I'll see if I can do it. So Dauda, what part of the Paris Alignment MDB framework have you implemented so far at Islamic Development Bank, and what are your lessons to date?
Thank you. So, you know, with the fact that at the Islamic Development Bank, the first climate action plan we had started in 2020, from 2020 to 2025. And at the same time, we were discussing among MDB colleagues on the different, on the framework and its different elements. So we used that opportunity when we were developing our different tools, our different systems to embed the Paris alignment aspect of it. So that helped a lot. We did not have to revise our physical climate risk management system to include those aspects, because we were building it, and at the same time we were in the discussions on Paris alignment. So the same, looking at aspects of mitigation, we were developing greenhouse gas accounting system. And we were also looking at piloting this approach while we were going. So from the start, even though we have planned to be Paris aligned by end of 2023, we went through the phase approach as what the MDBs did. We said, okay, for our sovereign operations, we feel comfortable after analysis of portfolio, pipeline, and everything, that we can say that we can be fully aligned by end of this year. So BB 1 and 2 will be will be addressed. So on the third one, looking at the whole climate finance ambition, what we do collectively, I think it was addressed at the same time. And we have a sustainable finance framework issuing green and sustainable sukuks, the equivalent of bond. On the policy part as well, we have been involved, even though one of the challenges, maybe it's not your next question, but I will talk about challenges. One of the challenges was the availability of grants. We don't have much grant available within the bank, but we were able to tap from the NDC partnership, the IKI, and some external funds to be able to address some of the needs in NDC implementation of our colleagues, of our member countries. So I would say that all of the BBs have been kind of covered. I said it, but there is still work to be done.
And can I ask you then, in this work to be done, which, as you said, it's a work in progress, what are the particular challenges that you think, and in which part of the framework do you see that in the next steps?
So I mentioned the issue of grant financing, concessionality of resources. That is not helping in the aspects of policy support. We don't have policy-based financing. We don't have that aspect. So that is something we need to to work more on. And also, I mentioned direct financing. There are other instruments that we know are within the bank or within the bank group that we need to start targeting. We need to look at non-sovereign financing and set a specific target. So all of these aspects, I think, are part of the work in progress that we need to address. Yes.
So last but not least, Giampiero from EBRD. So after almost 1 full year of operationalizing Paris alignment on new operations, what is your reflection on what have been the main implications at EBRD on process, prioritization and delivery of finance?
Thank you very much, Nancy. Great to be here. Maybe I'll use 1 minute to complement the history lessons of Cinzia, if you allow me. I'd like to make 2 points. One, that I was there from day one, so I'm one of those that have been there from the beginning. And there is one date is missing there, which is 2016, because when we started really looking into it. And I remember that was a very difficult process. We were there with a blank page, what we do. And we came with all the most fantastic ideas. And I need to recognize that the breakthrough came from Nancy, because she really proposed a very Cartesian approach to the problem, and that's the 6 building blocks were very much the basis of the conversation that really helped us to progress with the work quite fast, in fact. And the second consideration is about what this process really represents for us, because if I look at, we are at the place where there is a lot of talks about tipping points and how ecosystems react. In the MDBs ecosystem, this was the second tipping point. The first was really the work on the climate finance tracking methodology. That was really created a strong focus on climate finance in our group, right? But this was very much the second, because it was the element that really shifted the way we work together and operate really as a system. So I'd like to make these 2 points because I think are important for also reflecting on the evolution and the trajectory. Now, coming back to the BRD, indeed, we are close to the first year of full implementation of the methodology. We had a pilot for the previous 2 years, so we have a bit of experience. So 4 key lessons. Actually, most of what has been said resonate with us as well, which again is a testament of the fact that this is very much a joint effort, and we are really sharing experience and practice. So without trying to replicate the same concept, but 4 elements. First of all, it's not painless, but can be done. It's doable. It comes with a cost, with an investment. It's very operationally has a lot of implication, but can be done, and ultimately, let's say, conduce to results, right? In fact, the second point is that it's worthwhile doing it. And I give you a number of examples. A DBRD, and I think it's the same for all of us, has been said already, this has become part of our strategic and operational identity. The acronym PA is recognized by everybody, from banking operations, from support teams, but also from our boards. PA is Paris alignment, no question. And 2 elements of why it's worthwhile doing. There is no coincidence, in my view. I don't think we have done any study about the fact that climate finance or MDBs has really stepped up the increase as we started to implement Paris alignment. Because now, when we deal with specific transactions, bankers are not coming to us and say, is this project Paris aligned or not? Let's filter it out. It's how to make this transaction Paris aligned. What we need to do to engage with our clients and achieve and improve our projects. And so this is really where impact can be created and value can be created within the organization. And the second point is about, in fact, BB2. The work on BB2 and the Paris alignment has been really catalytic in improving the understanding of physical climate risk and how to integrate climate risk, physical climate risk, in the way we design investments. Third point, has been said already, interdependencies between the different building blocks. Absolutely critical. These days, we do a lot of policy conditions in our transactions that ultimately are Paris alignment related, and vice versa. Ultimately, there is a narrative underpinning Paris alignment as a traction outside, as a traction with the donors community, with the think tanks, but also with clients. I agree that sometimes the language is not immediate, but when I go to a corporate client, and this happens so many times, and describe what it means, Paris alignment for us, and what are the conditions that we need to introduce in our financing, they understand. And this is also, of course, in the financial sector, this is more even the case, because clearly a lot of financial institutions are looking at their own transition plans, and they're looking at how ultimately this type of framework can have positive operational implications.
Thank you very much. So I know that at EBRD you're implementing the whole framework, all 6 parts, but it's obviously a phased approach. Can you tell us what the next major steps are for EBRD on the rest of the framework?
Okay, so clearly I mentioned that comes with the cost, right? And there are areas which are particularly challenging. For example, and I think this is a common issue, keeping track and keeping up to speed with the policy developments, the technology developments is very complex. And this entail a lot of internal debates, exchanging experience with the other MDBs, and particularly when it comes to the difficult sectors, that entail a very difficult, very complex, lengthy transition. The second element is on the reporting and disclosure framework. I think we all report a lot, we make a lot of investments, but I must be very transparent here. For example, one area that we are still struggling is the post-signing reporting, actually tracking, monitoring, and reporting. So that's an area we're going to invest. And allow me another 20 seconds. One area where at EBRD I think we're really investing in resources, capacity, and we really believe is going to be a major principle informing our activity is really the intersection between BB3 and BB4, or I would say vice versa, BB4 and BB3. So it's all the policy work at sectoral level, at the country level, that ultimately we're trying more and more to link to climate finance programs and investments.
Thank you very much. We did hear quite a few things, and I think all of us learn at every time we have an exchange, and that's very positive. I want to add one historical point as well that wasn't mentioned. When you hear the discussion about net zero, and a lot of these discussions about a overall portfolio approach, the MDBs very specifically decided not to do that in their Paris alignment approach, because our job is not to disinvest. Indeed, as several of you have said, our job is not to just stop financing and walk away from, for example, high risk, whether it's transition or physical, but to help the clients to transform their investments and to help them transform their organizations. But I take absolutely the point from IFC on jargon. I think we'll try and make it, maybe we'll have a pot for a sin pot or whatever. Put the money in for the coffee if you say the thing, I'm not going to say it. Okay, so now we come to the audience, and I'm going to throw the floor open. Anybody, I think we've got a roving mic, and happy to take questions. So we've got, okay. And then this lady here, thank you.
Hi, thank you very much. Elina Vallinen from the European Investment Bank. I have 2 questions. Firstly, to our AFDB colleague. You've been sharing the building block 6 on aligning internal activities, and just interested in the challenges there. Are we walking the talk, as Cinzia put it? And a second question relating to, we were talking about forward-looking assessment of Paris alignment. At the EIB, we've been screening for physical climate risk in our new operations since 2019. I know many of the other MDBs are doing that as well. Are any of you, or are any of us thinking about the physical climate risk that might be in our existing portfolios with our existing clients? And is that support something that is coming through?
Those are 2 very good questions. So Alhamdulillah, would you like to do the BB6? And then anybody here want to do physical climate risk of existing clients? Yeah, Giampiero? Okay, thank you. Oh, okay.
Is it working? Okay. I think there are several challenges on operationalizing BB6. Actually, I was about to speak on this because it requires, collaboration across the institution. As mentioned, you need to work with all the other departments like, treasury, procurement, travels, general services, finance. So it's a bit difficult because of the fact that it has to do with our internal systems also, facilities, and we have prepared a guidance note. It's not too prescriptive; it's just general guidance. But at the end of it, every MDB is going to apply the node up based on their own context. So the challenges are there. We know that because it has a lot of implications across the institution. And for us, we see it already when we discuss with our general service department. They are saying that they don't have the systems in place to operationalize the BB6. So again, the issue of capacity. What capacity do we have? But for instance, for us, we are aiming to have a new building. So probably BB6 will be a key tool to help design a building that is not, that is Paris aligned, let me put it that way. So, sorry, I'm going to use BB again, but BB6 is very important. And of course, we need to, this is our contribution to the Paris Agreement, yeah? So BB6 is very important, and this is an area where we are going to continue some work next year because we have some unfinished work on that particular building block.
Yes, I think you make the very good point about needing capacity and needing systems. That sounds like exactly how we help our clients. So I think you're basically saying that the thing that Cinzia said is, for us to be able to better help our clients, we also have to walk the talk ourselves, because those are exactly some of the challenges they're facing. And if we learn how to address them in our own organization, we should be better able to give good support to our clients. Giampiero, on the other question.
So very good question related to a complex topic. So what we do definitely at the individual project level with the new transactions, we're doing, we have a methodology that we apply using a number of external resources as well. So we look at, of course, physical climate risk of new operations. And we are starting looking at the portfolio. And it, as you probably know, is a complex area of work. There isn't necessarily an established methodology. There are, of course, a number of pilots have been done by different institutions. It's an area we're looking into with a lot of strong interest. But I think it will take some time before we'll be able to really have aggregated the capacity to report aggregated information. For the moment, we are tagging the financial assets we have, which may have an exposure to let's say, to high degree of physical climate risk. So we have that knowledge and understanding, but we are not yet able to consolidate this assessment and disclose, for example, this information. We have been progressing quite a lot on the transition risk. There we have more established practices, and in fact, this year, the first time, I believe, in our TCFD report, we reported first information, first data on financed emissions, for example. So as you know, in the physical climate risk space, there isn't necessarily a single kind of approach, that talks about using value at risk type of consideration. But I don't think we are there yet to be able to report. Thank you.
Thanks very much. If I can add a thought on that, I think it's a very good question for public banks, because what the existing portfolio is a whole group of existing clients. And if they are at risk, it's not just a question of whether we report and what do we do and what does our risk department do. It's also a question of, do we have any kind of action that we as public banks might take in the same way that we are sort of proactively looking at our new clients. It's not an easy question to answer, but I actually think, in fact, I think it came up in Paris when we launched the mainstreaming principles. I can see the mainstreaming initiative over there, but that issue of, what would a public bank do about risk in its portfolio is a very good topic for next year, I would say. So, other questions from the audience, please. This lady had some questions, and then please, if anybody else, please put your hands up if you have something you want to ask.
Yeah, I'm Alison Doig. I'm from Recourse. We're part of the Big Shift Alliance, our network. So the International Energy Agency says that our electric grid system has to be net zero by 2040. We may have language on fossil phase out in this year's COP. That's part of the Paris implementation. And many of the client countries you work with have net zero by 2050 targets, and that's accelerated in this decade, really. But you still, with under the Paris, you haven't talked really about the content, what the projects will, what the changes will be in reality. And you still have investments in fossil gas. You include embedded industrial coal in your plants. So how are you, I really want to know how you're talking to your clients about the real imperative of phasing out fossil fuel in the next 1-2 decades to meet those longer term targets, and how are you factoring the cost, the cost risk of stranded assets, of the assets that are being invested in now?
That is, of course, the question of this COP, and who would like to take it? I would like to point out that at EIB we haven't financed unabated fossil fuel power since 2020, apart from a few grandfathered projects, but we do still have some industrial projects, and so we have to look at Paris alignment there. But, you know, that is something that has to improve over time. So I wouldn't say, look at us, that's fantastic, woo. I would say we're going to have to continue to look at that and see how that needs to evolve as technologies and sectors do evolve. But I'm going to ask if other MDBs would like to handle, I think it was about power, but also about the hard to abate sectors where fossil fuel is still there. Yes, okay. How are you integrating that part in your work?
That part, I think you have the same question at the annual meeting of the World Bank in September. I'll give the same answer for IFC. I'm giving the example when we do finance, we still finance CCGT project in certain circumstances. And one example we gave at the time to your colleague was what we did in Uzbekistan. In Uzbekistan, the CCGT project that we financed was very much aligned with the decarbonization strategy of the country. It was facilitating the penetration of renewable energy into the grid. And we did look at the risk of stranded asset and were able, based on the analysis of the trajectory of the country, to demonstrate that the asset we are financing will not be a stranded asset. So the point you're raising are really at the heart of the MDB methodology. We're looking at the country context, we're looking at the sector context, and inclusion given this context. And that's, I think, the answer we gave in September, and it's still valid today.
Anybody else like to add? Yep.
Just a comment, because I completely resonate with the way we operate at EBRD. You know, we strongly believe that we have a role to play in the transition, so we want to support the countries where we operate to deal with the difficult sectors, you know, because ultimately, you mentioned industry, you know, industrial activities is key for economic development, is key for jobs, is key for many things. And the approach we follow is that we provide finance only upon, you know, certain conditions are realized and met. You know, for example, we want that, you know, companies develop decarbonization plan, which are aligned with the 1.5-degree trajectory. We introduce you know, requirements in terms of disclosure, for example. We support them. We have a program, it's called Corporate Climate Governance, where we help our clients in the corporate sector and incidentally also in the financial sector and with municipalities to, first of all, adopt and apply, you know, tools to understand better their climate risk, both transition risk and physical climate risk, introduce better discipline in how these risks are managed and, you know, and how they are linked to decision-making processes, but also very much in terms of how they, you know, their corporate practices reflect these considerations. And when it comes to finance, we do also link the finance to interventions, investments, which ultimately are consistent with the decarbonization trajectory that is in line with 1.5 degrees. And the policy in the... Well, I'll give you an example. You know, 2 days ago, we presented with the Deputy Minister of Industry of Turkey the work we've been doing with them on the decarbonization of 4 industrial sectors: cement, steel, aluminum, and fertilizer. These are low carbon pathways that, you know, are designed to achieve carbon neutrality by 2053, in line with the Turkey target of carbon neutrality by the same date. And these comprise a combination of policy interventions, investments, and specific technologies that allow the sectors to achieve this target. And we would finance companies operating these 4 sectors only if they ultimately make investments which are in line with these trajectories.
Okay, I think that's a discussion that could probably continue. I'm going to stop it there because I'm just going to simply say thank you very much to the panelists. Thank you very much to the questions from the audience. The next joint event tomorrow in the middle of the day is Nature Positive Solutions. And now I'm going to invite Hylan Mirovic from IDB Invest, who's the climate head for IDB Invest, to close us out. Thank you.
Thank you. Very quickly, because I know you've heard quite a lot of speakers, but we just wanted to reiterate that this is a process of learning by doing. We have, as Jean-Pierre said, we didn't know, we had an empty sheet in front of us, and we didn't know how we were going to implement this process that has been quite difficult, challenging, but that doesn't mean that it's pushing us or stopping us from doing what we need to do. We have similar challenges. Of course, we need grant resources to support our clients, be those government or be private sector. And we're also having a lot of trainings and capacity building internally, because we need to generate the trust of the teams internally. I like the idea of not calling it BB1, BB2, or BB6, because otherwise our investment officers do not know what we're talking about. But thank you so much for joining us, and this is just part of the road, and hopefully we will increase ambition with all of these actions. Thank you.